Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Boston University webinar, Fundraising Through a Pandemic, How the Landscape Has Changed. Thank you for tuning in this afternoon to hear from our panel of instructors about how they've adapted their fundraising efforts to meet the new climate and how these innovative techniques will be brought forward in 2021. My name is Sarah, and I will be moderating today's session alongside our presenters and host, Jon Schaffrath. We have an engaging session planned for you today and welcome our audience to ask questions during our panel discussion. We will also conduct a Q&A session at the end of the presentation to address your fundraising questions pertaining to BU's certificate program. And as a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded and a link will be sent to your email for your reference and to share with your colleagues. How will nonprofit fundraising look in the new year, and how do we continue to overcome the obstacles brought on by the pandemic? So during today's presentation, we'll examine a few key areas pertaining to this topic with our panel. And Jon will then give a brief introduction to our online fundraising certificate program. We'll cover some course logistics and the registration process, and then we'll wrap up with our final Q&A. All right, I'd now like to introduce the Professional Fundraising Program Director and today's host, Jon Schaffrath. As the Interim Senior Director of Major Gifts at the Harvard Business School, Jon has spent many years in alumni engagement, annual funds, volunteer management, and major gifts. Jon completed the BU fundraising program in 2007 and has been instructing for the past 12 years. All right, that now brings us to our discussion with our panelists today. And before I hand it over to Jon just to kick off the conversation, I'd like to just briefly introduce our panel of development professionals. And we do encourage you to ask questions to our panel throughout the discussion today as well. All right, our first panelist today is Stanley Onua. Stanley is BU's newest instructor, who is a recent alumni of the Professional Fundraising Certificate Program. Stanley is the Director of Parent and International Philanthropy for the West Coast and Asia at Emerson College. Stanley works as a portfolio manager and corporate banker while also leading community-based organizations to develop fundraising strategies and philanthropic programming. All right, next we have Kelly Rafferty, and Kelly is the Director of Development for the Mary and John Elliott Charitable Foundation, part of the Elliott Healthcare System in Manchester, New Hampshire. She has over 2 decades of nonprofit management and philanthropic experience, specializing her efforts in the healthcare sector. And next we have Kylie Johnson. Kylie is the Senior Philanthropy Officer and Planned Giving Manager for Bay State Health Foundation in Western Massachusetts. Kylie was also named the Top 40 Under 40 for her work as a director in Virginia Tech's successful $1 billion comprehensive campaign. Kylie is a program builder with major and planned gift expertise. And we have Ellen Sullivan. Ellen is the Director of International Advancement at Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts, where she shapes gift development strategies for top potential campaign donors from abroad and manages a portfolio of international giving prospects. And prior to Phillips Academy, Ellen had a long career in higher education at Harvard and Boston College in international advancement. And we have Teresa Lee. Teresa is the founder and CEO of TJL Partners, a consultancy that provides top quality strategy, training, and practical solutions to fundraising and staffing challenges. She has worked in a variety of advancement roles, including major gifts, management of annual and major gift fundraising teams, alumni and parent relations, and an expert in annual giving and special project fundraising. And finally, we have Frank White. Frank is an independent consultant to nonprofit organizations with a special interest in strategic communications fundraising for proposal writing. Frank has been working in the field of development since 1994, with a very large portion of that time spent at Harvard University in a variety of positions. All right, and with that, I'll turn it over to you now, Jon.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah, for the kind words and introductions. So I wanted to start by saying a big thank you to all those who are here or who are listening later. As I've said before, I'm always inspired by individuals who are looking to go into the field of nonprofit fundraising and philanthropy, who are in the field trying to learn more, or who are volunteers trying to have the biggest impact that they can. I am, truly, truly grateful for the impacts you all will have. And for any role we can all play in helping you learn and be better in the field. I'd also like to take this opportunity, because I don't get to that often, but to sort of thank the incredible instructor team we have here in front of us on this panel, and share my gratitude for your involvement with this program. As I was mentioning in the quote unquote green room before that, my best ideas, I've not had an original thought in many years, and they come from groups like these, and particularly the 6 individuals who you're going to hear from today. So I'm thrilled to share a little bit about the program later today, but right now, as we're all continuing now almost a year into the public health crisis of the pandemic, as well as so many other things in society and challenges around race and diversity and inclusion, that, there's been a lot of turmoil, but I think through that, much has changed in the landscape, much has been learned, and hopefully we'll shed some light on that. So I'm going to start with a question to each of the panelists. We pride ourselves on being instructor led by and close to practice. And so I would ask, let's start with Kelly. Can each of you share sort of one tip or trick you've picked up in the last year that has made your work in the context of the pandemic easier, better, more effective?
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
We can. Thank you, Kelly.
Great. Hello, everyone. One of the unique things that happened for us being in the healthcare space is we've been able to engage with members of our community that we may not have been able to engage with or had engaged with previously. The great sense of community spirit to show support for our frontline staff really was incredible. We had to pivot immediately. We were in the middle of a capital campaign. We had literally launched the public phase of our campaign on January 31st. And then March 15th, we went into lockdown, and we pivoted our fundraising to support the response to COVID-19. Because we didn't know what was coming. We didn't know the severe financial impact that the hospitals were going to feel. But very quickly, we were able to raise over $250,000, plus gathering PPE and snacks for our staff. So it was really incredible just how the community came out to support their local hospital. But the other really interesting thing for us in that pivot was partnership. We partnered with 3 of the other hospitals here in Southern New Hampshire to share the story of what was happening in supporting patients with COVID, the need for PPE, and we also did a shared fundraising platform as well. And that's not something that you generally see. I mean, everybody, likes to share best practices across fundraising organizations, but this was a true partnership in the middle of a crisis. And from there, I think it really strengthened our community's understanding of who we are as healthcare institutions and how we are nonprofit organizations. Most people don't think of large hospitals as nonprofits, and they really need to. So that was, I think, one of the really most important things that came out of this crisis for us was reaching networks and people that we hadn't met before, and then that partnership in the pivot to support the COVID response.
That's great. Thanks, Kelly. And that is really interesting, the phrase of we're good at sharing best practice, which I think we are in our industry. That's wonderful. But to hear an actual example of sharing a platform that you probably wouldn't have otherwise is pretty powerful. Ellen, what would you share to this?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to share an example that comes from the nonprofit organization that I'm on the board of and a volunteer for, which is called South Africa Partners. So this is sort of like my extracurricular activity in addition to my Andover role. And South Africa Partners was created about 22 years ago in Boston to focus on HIV/AIDS care in South Africa. And this year, when I was thinking about the annual appeal, I wanted something different. I didn't want a letter. I didn't want a report. Frankly, I wanted a greeting card. And I thought, nobody sends Thanksgiving cards. And yet our appeal is happening right around Thanksgiving. So we designed, I should say I designed, our annual appeal from South Africa Partners, this nonprofit, as a physical card in an orange envelope so that it would stand out in the mail, most of which consists of bills and other boring items. And we sent our appeal that way. And the message was quite brief, and it talked about the urgency this year more than before, and asked our donors to stay with us, and most of them did. So that was one sort of offbeat holiday. And we just finished a Valentine's Day appeal. And again, how many Valentines do we get as grown-ups? Not that many. So we got a lot of good feedback from our Valentine's Day campaign as well.
That's great. Love to hear that. I'm going to go now to Frank, and I'm going to lead the witness a little bit. I'd love to hear if you would be willing to share how you've gone virtual with some of your weekly group meeting for the the Human Space Project. Right?
The witness was prepared, John. I was going to talk about that.
Awesome.
So I think what's interesting about this, and first of all, I want to be careful to say I don't think the pandemic is a good thing. I think that goes without saying, and sometimes we have to remind ourselves of how really bad it's been for so many people. And at the same time, crises like this do trigger innovation, and that is kind of what happened. I had started a nonprofit called the Human Space Program, and we had spent about a year doing traditional fundraising without many resources whatsoever. When the pandemic hit, I wanted to do something that was relevant to it because, as you know, my wife Donna had been in the hospital. She did not have COVID, but she had been quite ill. And it made me want to just do something relevant to the pandemic rather than business as usual. And so what we did was to start a series of virtual meetings every Wednesday at noon, where we asked the question, how is the pandemic going to change people's attitudes about space exploration and development, which is what we do. And as you know, John, I've always said you have to be a giving organization rather than a getting organization. And so we made this a gift to the space community. And it was remarkable. People just started coming. They just started attending regularly. And it was never intended to be a fundraising activity. And finally, after 10 months of giving, we decided it was time to make a request because we needed funds to start a website. And so after 10 months of giving people what they were, receiving from these weekly meetings, we said we would really like to make an ask because we do need a website, and here's who we are and here's what we do. And we had a matching gift made available by one of our donors, and it was amazing. People stepped up. We couldn't even finish the session. People just stepped up and started giving money through the website. And I think the point I'd like to leave you with is that this is an activity that never would have taken place without the pandemic. It was triggered by the pandemic. And I guess what I would say about fundraising through the pandemic is to think about what is it that's unique about the situation where, as other speakers have shared, what can we do that we just never would have done before? And how can we how can we make the best use of this very, very difficult situation?
Thank you, Frank. And I also, I draw from that too, the sort of patience of philanthropy. I know a lot of our organizations we might work with, like to see the results quickly, and that's not always the most effective way to get there. Stan, can I turn it to you? And I will also mention to everyone that you're out on the West Coast, so providing us a little, at least US geographic diversity. So please share what you've done that's been new or effective in this landscape.
Sure, thanks, Sean. You know, on our end, there were a set of assumptions. So I want to kind of set the table that way, in the sense that some of those assumptions were that, especially in the higher ed space, was that, you know, in the middle of a pandemic, you know, that folks would be less likely to give, that they may be they may have other kind of issues that they're dealing with and just be less philanthropic. But that has been, I've had the opposite experience. And I think that one of the things that has changed is that we have a common enemy, and that enemy is COVID-19, the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's galvanized, I think, folks in a different way and brought them together in a way that I think was unexpected. Some of the things that we've done, you know, not only from a higher ed perspective, but even from a parents that have students that are in higher education perspective, is that we have engaged parents in a way that lean on their subject matter expertise. We have not just asked them for dollars. We have asked them for their talent and to bring different ideas to the table. And I think Karen Osborne, who is a fairly famous fundraising strategist, she mentions this a lot in leveraging your donor base's expertise, because I think that is a different kind of investment than financial support. So that was a key that was unlocked, or a gem that was unlocked for at least being in the smaller group that I work with on the major gift side. The other thing I would add to that is figuring out ways to be a giver before you're an asker, before you make an ask, right? Like, so Frank made a really great point about kind of providing content and information for 10 months before even making an ask. And I think that, one of the things that we understood was that, parents want to know information about what's going on with their adult students, and where we could provide a resource or give was we could give information, right? So drawing on different department heads or senior leadership to come and speak to a group of parents that had significant capacity was very important, because that was a need that they had, and something that that they perceived to be very valuable, as they wanted to know what was going on and provide their input. So those are a couple of things that we honed in on and that have proven to be fairly successful.
That's great, Stan, and nice to see this common thread of giving before getting coming through. Kylie, what is your experience been, or what would you share on the practical side?
Yeah, well, those of you haven't had me in class, but I think it's been a year that I work in plan giving primarily. I do major gifts, but at the heart of our work is to be donor centric and to build relationships, and this was a terrific year to do that. So there's some new things, but it's also just the amplification of things. So when COVID first happened and the world was shut down, I ran to the Dollar Tree and bought out all the thinking of you cards in every way, shape, or form to send to, primarily older donors. Many of them were home by themselves or just with, loved ones. Some were caregivers. And so, our stationery is nice, but maybe a little bit corporate. So to send a fun card, and it goes back to what Ellen was saying, and we actually do send Thanksgiving cards, but to get something in a brightly colored envelope with the handwritten address, with the handwritten note, and threw in my business card with my cell phone number written on it saying, reach out if you need to talk. And it's been incredible how many people, donors who've been in my portfolio that haven't really engaged with me, have called me this year or emailed me or connected with me because I just kept reaching out. And there's some people that, you just do the little touches and you never hear from them and you think, oh, why am I doing this? But, there were a lot of breakthroughs this year, and I think it was just quality communication. So those little touches of send them something unexpected, and then also just sending them impact on their giving, or, hey, I thought you'd be interested in this talk. At the same time, our organization did a lot of like what my colleagues here were talking about, conversations with leaders. So if you're interested in heart and vascular, you can come hear the leaders speak, or you can hear our expert in infectious diseases talk about COVID-19. And so ways that we opened it up to communities so that at least they could listen in, get information, and be part of something.
That's great. And I do love the Dollar Tree story, I must say. I think it's also interesting. So many of the folks on this webinar today are interested in learning more and learning best practice. And I'm, always seeing our field continue to professionalize. But I think that also just adds to the importance of, as Kylie said, doing something unexpected as a way to break through, because many of the things, that the typical things are table stakes now for any good nonprofit organization trying to raise funds. Teresa, you've worked with a few organizations during this past year. What have you seen that's been particularly effective or changed things for the better on the fundraising or engagement side?
Yeah, so often when we have crises, they're coupled with budget reduction or staff reduction, which we've seen. And I had a colleague years ago who said, I think we're better when they cut our budget because we are forced to be more creative. And we have to make smarter choices. And I would couple that notion with the idea that we now have technology at our fingertips to connect with people. And the conventional wisdom, I think, originally was A, people don't want to hear from nonprofits, B, technology feels cold. But what I have seen with my clients is that there are really intimate ways to connect with people that you might not guess at a first look, and that people are responsive to those intimate ways. And in fact, there's more of an immediacy and a back and forth connection with some forms of technology. Specifically, clients using a product called ThankView, where you can make a video, you can even customize that video for the specific person you're sending it to, and introduce yourself if you're a gift officer. In fact, they're now calling people digital gift officers. Let's say you have to reach a wide array of people, but otherwise you might have gone to visit people one by one, but now you actually can touch more people with technology. And so they start with a video introducing themselves and say, generally speaking, it's to prior donors or high-end prospects, to say, hey, this is who I am. They're very direct about what they do. I want to connect you back to the organization. I want to answer your questions. If you're ready to make a gift, I've provided a link at the bottom of this email that contains a video. If not, I'd love to have a conversation with you, and I can be reached at X, Y, and Z. If you prefer, we can text. So if you want to send me your cell phone number, if I don't already have it, tell me how you prefer to communicate, and I will communicate with you on that channel. And what they found is they got a very high response rate from the video, because they were physically showing their faces and sending a very specialized message to that person. So it felt more directed, as opposed to getting an email directed at many, many people. And then often people would say, hey, I can't be in front of a camera at this moment, but sure, I'll text with you. Then they can answer maybe while they're doing something else, or in whatever time period they want to do that. And the report back is that it was actually more intimate and more immediate and higher contact rates and a back and a forth, if you will, a conversation than the traditional, hey, I'd like to come out and see you. And then let's say you get the meeting and then you follow up, by email or text, and then you wait X amount of time to have another contact with them. This is an ongoing relationship now facilitated by technology. And I think it's a win in some cases. We all do know that being physically in front of people is the ideal. But in the absence of that, I think there are technological channels that you can use to facilitate your intimate relationships.
Well, that's great, Teresa. And it actually, it puts on steroids, sort of donor-centered. It's prospect-centered, because often the initial outreach that we all do is not, I'm coming to town on this day. Can you be available on my schedule? And this is totally from the beginning of, I just want to get to know you. You tell me how you'd like to start the engagement and what the best way is. That's really great. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I'm going to direct this to Ellen. So not everyone's going to get every question. I just want to remind people that if you have a question, feel free to type it in and I'll try to address those too. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say you've probably done some solicitation, Ellen Sullivan, during this period of time as well. And while we all know engagement in relationship building is important, many of us have institutions and bosses who would like us to be closing gifts as well. How have you found closing gifts in making asks in this environment?
Well, I'm going to allow myself to answer this in the context of another question that you floated with us, which was what was surprising to you as we closed out 2020? And so for us at Andover, we closed out the fiscal year 2020 in June of 2020. And what was surprising to me, John, was the fact that from March 13th of this past year to June 30th, I was able to close six-figure major gift commitments for Andover, like from my dining room table. And what's important to understand about that was rewinding the tapes to last August and September, I told myself I'm going to be more bold this year. I'm not going to be the genteel, soft, whenever it's the right time for you, oh, don't worry, we can talk about fundraising later, fundraiser. And I think my school is very old and it sort of has this genteel approach to fundraising. And I decided I'm going to break the mold and I'm going to be a little more bold. As a result, in the fall of 2019, I created a lot of written proposals for people whom I asked, would you be willing to take a look at a proposal that I have for you on financial aid? Or would you be willing to take a look at a proposal that I've created for our new music building? I know your child is very involved in music. It's a bold ambition we have. Would you look at the proposal? And if they said, yes, I will look at the proposal, I prepared a tailor-made proposal for them and got it in their hands before December of 2019. And that allowed me to sort of act on those proposals by checking in with the families during the course of the spring. And of course, the first question is, how are you? How is your family? How is your child? But that is what enabled me to close 6 gifts during those weeks at home.
That's great, Ellen. That's a good lesson in pandemic and not. Stan, how have you found things on the solicitation front?
Yeah, I think that Ellen hit it right on the head. It's about being bold and making the ask. And I closed a gift towards the end of the year, multi-6-figure gift, and it was in large part because of being bold and breaking the mold. I think what's so important is to be innovative and to be creative, right? And to not necessarily just stay within the mold. I think one of the keys to that gift was having, first of all, a great VP who was very supportive of my creativity to say, hey, look, this is what I'm hearing from the donor. This is where they're passionate. And this is the areas that I think that we could highlight and the tiers that we could present, at least in terms of recognition and what the donor could expect. To Ellen's point around, the example of a music hall. Well, knowing that a parent's child is interested in music and there's a music building being erected or a new music facility, those kind of connections from the donor's passion to a proposal that is aligned with that, and being bold to make an ask, and being ambitious in the ask in terms of the different levels that you ask at, because you never know what a donor's kind of situation is. And I think to someone's point earlier, in this global pandemic, I think Frank may have mentioned this, there have been folks that have been, impacted in a really detrimental way, and our hearts go out to them. But there have been other folks who have also thrived in this pandemic, and it's really a kind of a taboo kind of conversation. But if you're in the tech space or tech and security space, or in some cases in the asset management space, it has been a different ride, right? So I say all that to say, being bold, being creative, and understanding that if you go beyond the guardrails or beyond the bounds, the donor will reel you in and let you know where they fit. But definitely be bold and creative, and go with those kind of instincts, because you have been doing the work for a while and been working with the donor, and have cultivated the relationship enough to know what they would be interested in.
That's great. Thanks, Dan. I'll turn to Teresa. From the volunteer perspective, have you seen anything? Many of our organizations rely heavily on volunteer leadership, but also volunteers to do some of the fundraising and engagement work. Have you seen anything particularly effective on that front during this time?
Well, I am a volunteer myself. I serve on the board of my university, and I think back to my original comments, using our voices through social media to amplify the good work of the university and the engagement programs that they're putting together is something that I'm really working with on the board that I serve on, because it is the one way that we can volunteer right now, is to get over that concept of the one to many, the university out to many, trying to engage them and get them to go to online programs. But when we each influence our circles and networks and personally ask people, it's the equivalent if you were going to be going to an event and you called a friend and you said, actually, I'm going to be there. Why don't you meet me there? Because we all know we don't like to show up to things where we're not sure what's going to happen or who's going to be there. And I think there is a way to also follow that model digitally, to say to people, hey, I'm going to be attending this event online. I've heard great things about it, or I'm involved. Please join me. So while volunteers right now are kind of standing down in some cases, they are struggling, at least in the higher ed space, to help the university engage fellow alumni. That is a way that they can help. So I've asked our university, the University of Maine, to reactivate the volunteers in a different way. Again, digitally, everything digital.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a great point. Good sort of reminder too, that to use the tools that we have at any given time, and the tools may be limited in some ways, but also new in other ways. Frank, could I ask you to share a little bit about what you've seen or heard in sort of the virtual world over these past 10 months, and how that's an example maybe of how that's been used to engage potential donors or prospects and volunteers?
Well, I think there's something happening that has not quite made it onto the scene yet, but it's a topic we discuss in the program in the development communications side. And that is the beginning to use immersive media, augmented reality, and virtual reality. People are now very accustomed to virtual meetings like this one and like Zoom and the other technologies we've been talking about. And it's interesting that there was quite a big upsurge in sales of virtual reality headsets recently for Christmas. A lot of people got them for Christmas. And, you know, I have an old friend Tom Nickel, who is an expert on using virtual reality for fundraising and for other means. He's doing some work with a group in Cambodia that is bringing arts back to the Cambodian landscape. And he's been taking his cameras out into the countryside with Cambodian artists and creating virtual reality products or communications products, which he then uses back in the United States to talk to donors for this organization. And it's something that you have to do one-on-one. It doesn't scale very well right now, but it's been pretty successful. And his son Jeremy has an online virtual ministry. He happens to be a ministry, and he's doing quite a lot there, including fundraising in virtual reality. And he invited me to come to one of his fundraising sessions as a guest speaker. And it was very, very interesting because we did everything, that you normally do in a real environment, and yet we did it with virtual reality. And there's been quite a lot of interesting discussion on this topic within the course, and people tend to see it as having great promise. It's not quite there yet, but I would suggest to people to keep an eye on virtual reality and immersive platforms, because people are getting used to being online so much, and they might adopt to some new technologies as well.
For sure, yeah. To me, the opportunity seems very significant to sort of figure this out at this time. Thanks, Frank. Kylie, you've taken on this role with PGNI, the Plan Giving Group of New England, around programming and learning. And so I'd be interested from that perspective, or just from your own, how have you stayed current on fundraising topics, or sort of decided what to be sharing in your role with other fundraisers or those who are interested over these past 10 months?
Well, gosh, if you want to stay current, I mean, we've been in the world of free webinars. I mean, I could probably fill almost every hour of every day with some kind of free webinar. There's been so much content out there, so it's picking and choosing what you really want to do. For PGNI, which is Plan Giving Group in New England, it's a old organization with a rich, strong history in New England, and you know, we used to have monthly in-person meetings every month during the calendar year with about 150 attendees or more, and you got to socialize and see people. So we suddenly had to turn it all online. It enabled us to get really high quality speakers from all over the country, because we didn't have to pay to have people travel to Boston to speak. So that was terrific. And you know, we just asked our board and our members what they want to hear. So we just tried to get the best speakers possible and hit, you know, really a range of topics to fill in the gaps. And PGNI is committed to a keynote speaker who kind of lifts our sites and really, you know, pushes us in our thinking, to nuts and bolts for people who've been in the field and want to dive a little deeper into something, and sort of introductory things for people who are newer in the field. And so we had to meet all of those parameters. So I think it's just making a lot of phone calls, but it's been really fun because we've gotten to know a lot of different people across the country as we've been setting these up.
Yeah, no, that's really neat. It has opened the aperture for sure. So I want to get ready to conclude the panel, but I'd like to give a last question to Kelly, specifically based on the work that you do. So, with a vaccine on the horizon, with people getting vaccinated across the country and across the world, do you have any initial thoughts as how we're going to begin to this next phase of life, but sort of more specifically, we'll talk about in the fundraising context, where we might be getting back to some in-person activity and might get a higher comfort level based on the vaccine?
So the first thing that I would say is, as much as we can help those in our communities who may not be technically connected, help anyone you can, especially our older community members, to get the vaccine. I know it is a very nerve-wracking situation. It's quote unquote newer vaccine technology, but they've been working on it for 15 or more years. But I think the vaccine is really critical for us to get our lives back to normal. I am really glad that I was able to get the vaccine working in healthcare, and I think it's critically important. As a hospital institution, we have a strong portfolio of community-based events, large and small. And for us, we're strategically thinking about what can we safely pull off. We have to hold ourselves to the highest standards possible in bringing people together to fundraise for our community. But I think in looking at what our experts, both at the state level and nationally, are saying around the progression of COVID-19, in the variants, I think we are going to have to live with some social distancing for some time to come, or mask wearing. But I think there is some glimmers of hope that, we may be able to gather together in the fall, more safely. I know for us, we're thinking creatively, and, just as my colleagues here have been talking about, getting creative and virtual events, or drive-through events where your donors can come and pick up a nice box of treats, that instead of having your normal gala that has several hundred people. I think that creativity is something that we need to continue to strive for moving forward. I know for us, we have several outdoor events and we are actively planning those, but we have contingency plans. And I think, if nothing else, pre-COVID, I think those of us in development, no matter if you are in the arts or you're in higher education or private schools, or like Kylie and I in healthcare, you've always had to be nimble and you've always had to pivot depending on different things in your community, or the market, competitiveness in a community, especially smaller communities where, the Boys and Girls Club might be doing a major capital campaign, and that is taking a lot of focus of donors that might overlap. We always have to be nimble. And I think this year forced so many of us into that nimbleness and even more creativity. So I think that is something that we're going to need to continue to take with us. But I think, as things ebb and flow in the course of the disease, different states are dealing with many different things. For us here in New Hampshire, we came through the spring and the summer with obviously a huge impact for our patients, but the fall and winter has been much worse here. And we're just starting to emerge out of that. We are close to only 100 patients, across New Hampshire now in the hospital. And now we're caring for those who have been impacted by this and the families who sadly are left behind, and what can we do to support them. But, you know, it's a sort of long-winded answer to say that we continue to need to be nimble, need to be creative, and we need to just keep reassuring our community that no matter what part of the sectors that we're all working in, that we're there to strengthen our communities through service. And I think that's something that will carry on long after we are looking back at COVID.
Thank you, Kelly. That was very well said. I very much appreciate that. Stan, Kelly, Kylie, Ellen, Teresa, Frank, thank you so much. I, for sure, learned a lot from all of your comments. For those who are interested in the BU program, these are the folks that you would get to learn from each week. And it really is a great opportunity to both get new ideas and sort of, as Kylie talked about, it's not, you know, we have an opportunity for new ideas through a live classroom, but there's also a deep opportunity for building the nuts and bolts and sort of the platform of learning and understanding of philanthropy and fundraising. So with that, I will let you guys feel free to hop off if you need to, and I'm just going to run through some details on the course, if it's so inspired, those who are attending or listening. As we've talked about, or as you've probably seen on the website, it's a 12-week program. Each week is a different module and a different topic. So you move from one instructor to the next. It's all practice-based, as we've talked about. It's taught by practitioners, and the work that you do is focused on putting together sort of a portfolio of understanding in the field. And as many of you might be pursuing the CFRE, it counts for your education points as well. Next slide. So who is this program good for? There's sort of four key constituents if you find yourself in one of these. So a big part of each cohort are career changers or those interested in getting into the field. And this is a great way to build your language, vocabulary, and understanding, as well as to get a sense of what the different opportunities to work in the field are. So again, it's sort of nuts and bolts. So you go from the people who process the gifts when they're sort of sent into the organization to the people who are at the cocktail parties, asking people for money, and everywhere in between. It's also great for those who are already in the field but looking for advancement and professional growth. Managers and team leaders, we also find getting a sense, many of us come through one slice of the field and sort of rise within an organization. This can help give a better understanding as you get to higher levels in the organization and need to have a broader view on many more topics. And finally, in sort of increasingly, we're seeing volunteers and board members from organizations join, maybe where there is limited professional staff, and maybe where there's, you know, just people who care deeply about an organization and want to make sure that they can contribute the best they can to the fundraising of it. You know, as you hopefully saw on the panel, because our sort of instructors also represent many of the demographics of our students, you know, there's a number of different industries. So the philanthropy is very interesting because it's not sort of one field. You have higher ed and healthcare, the arts and human services, and the jobs within them, as we've talked about a little bit, you know, from grant writer to plan giving officer. We've heard from a couple fundraising consultants. There's sort of a breadth of opportunity that all sort of has a similar underpinning in sort of your understanding of best practices of fundraising. Next slide. And this is just to briefly give folks a sense of what the 12 modules are. As I mentioned, it is nuts and bolts. So these are the key areas that you would find if you were walking into an advancement shop and trying to get a sense of what was going on. And really, not only are you going into each one of these topics each week, but you also spend time with your fellow classmates on discussion boards and in conversation during the live classroom, going deeper into these topic areas. Next slide.
All right, I'll take it over from here, John. Thank you so much. So I'll just run over a few program logistics that you can expect if you're enrolled in this course here. So this program is asynchronous, meaning the entire class does not have to be online at a specific time of day. You learn at your own pace within the 12-week time period. But though it is asynchronous, it is an instructor-led course, so it's not self-paced, and you will get FaceTime and the opportunity to talk with the staff and instructors as well. And you should log in daily to check announcements and messages and to participate in discussions through the discussion boards. You will also communicate with your instructors via these message boards or even privately through an internal messenger system. And a fairly new program feature that each student is actually assigned a fundraising mentor. And each mentor does work across a variety of nonprofit sectors. And you can use your mentor for networking or even career advice as well. The approximate time commitment is about 7 to 10 hours per week. And there are about 8 to 10 live video sessions throughout the 12-week program. Though attendance is not required, it is advised to attend these as well. And the online class platform we use is Blackboard. And as I just mentioned, the live video sessions here, so just a brief summary, these are interactive live sessions, about 45 minutes, 6 or 7 p.m. at night is usually when we hold these. They are done through Zoom, and each session is recorded or archived so that you can certainly access it on your own time. And the typical format for the live video sessions is that they do build upon the topic of the week prior, includes presentations, discussions, and Q&A as well. All right, so the program schedule. So for those who are interested in learning more about registering here, this is a typical enrollment schedule. The program is held 3 times a year. That's every January, May, and September. And the next upcoming session is the summer 2020 session, and the enrollment deadline for that is April 30th, and the class begins on May 11th. And the tuition for the program is $2,495, and the website is also listed here on the slide. We do have a few different payment options for students that students can take advantage of. We offer monthly payment plans up to 4 months. We have employer-funded payments as well. There is an approved Sallie Mae Smart Loan, and we have military benefits as well for those students. And if you have any questions pertaining to the program or the enrollment process, we have enrollment advisors that are happy to help and can be contacted at the information displayed here. The email is bostonuniversity@mindmax.net, telephone 617-502-8822, and the website is onlineprofundraising.bu.edu. All right, now it does now bring us to our final Q&A session to close this, this panel today. Please be sure to submit your questions in your questions box in your attendee control panel, and we'll get to your questions there. You can, of course, feel free to ask program-specific questions or perhaps any outstanding questions you might have from the panel session. We'll just give it a moment here. John, could you answer this question for us, please? Does this program also cover aspects of nonprofit management?
Yes, so it's specifically going to talk about the management of the development office, but we do have a week. One of the 12 weeks is around management and accountability.
Great, thank you, John. John, how can we use or should we use our assigned program mentors throughout this program?
Yes, that's a great point. So a great question. The way it's set up is that about a couple weeks into the program, you'll be introduced to a mentor, and the expectation is that you'll be getting together for a phone or video conversation, and then a sort of follow-up later in the program. And there's mentors and mentees who connected and they continue to stay in touch, so there's no limit to that. But the way to use them is really to learn about their experience in the field. The most helpful is to be sort of a non-biased sounding board. So if you're considering something in your a next professional move, or just sort of, some people getting a sense of their next 3 to 5 years of their job or in the field. It can be a great way to have those conversations. And many have also been former students, although not everyone is. So there can be ways to also learn about how to best take the learnings from the program forward into your personal and professional life.
Great, thank you, John. This next question says, can an AmeriCorps Education Award be used to cover the cost of the program, or is the education loan reimbursable by AmeriCorps Ed Award? John, I don't know if you have any feedback on that one. Otherwise, I can maybe direct this person to the enrollment team to answer that.
Yes, I'm not sure, so I would do that.
All right. I would just advise contacting the enrollment team to answer that question, and the information is on the previous slide here. Thank you. And John, do you have internship placement by the end of this program?
We do not. That's not a part of the program, but definitely connecting with instructors and other individuals in the course has led people to finding opportunities over time too.
Great, thank you, John. And this question here, maybe one of the panelists, if we still have a few on, could answer. Do you suggest organizations focus more on new donors or existing donors during this time?
John, do you want to volunteer?
Yes, please, Ellen.
I thought you might like a volunteer. This is Ellen. What we've been doing both at Andover and for South Africa Partners is really focusing on the people who've already supported our work. And one tip I would offer is, if you look at who gives through a donor advised fund, and that may be a fund through the Boston Foundation or through Fidelity Charitable or Vanguard Charitable or Schwab Charitable or the Minneapolis Foundation or any number of other vehicles, those are the people who've already allocated a significant portion of funding to be distributed to philanthropy. And if you notice that they've given to you before via one of these vehicles, then I would encourage you to follow up with the donor to ask them if they might even consider another gift through their donor advised fund, money they've already allocated to philanthropy. So you're essentially advocating for your organization as opposed to another one who might otherwise be the recipient of those philanthropic dollars.
Yeah, I would. This is Stanley. John, I'm gonna chime in because I took the course, so I want to just say that Ellen just gave a huge gem, and that DAF, donor advised fund tip, is like so huge, because if you can filter donors in that way, you'd be surprised what you would unlock. And so what a great recommendation. The other piece I would say is that I think it works on both ends. Just to the question of, do you focus on new donors or old donors? I think it just depends on where you are in your overall fundraising cycle. So I did find value on both ends. I think that if the way how I would, that I used it was that, is there a donor base where there's great opportunity, whether that's existing donors or a segment of your donor base that has not necessarily been activated to its greatest potential. So the course really gave great opportunities to think through that and come up with plans for that group, which you can obviously implement in your professional life.
Thank you, Stanley and Ellen. Sarah, do we have any final questions? I know we're a little bit over time.
We are. We have one final question here. It looks like this question is, have you had international students enroll in the past?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, we usually have a handful, so maybe like 10% of the course tends to be international, coming from countries around the world and sharing incredibly helpful perspective. The course, we have a specific module that actually Ellen leads right at the beginning to sort of set some context around international fundraising. We also have built that, again, thanks to Ellen's great work, into each module. So while many of the people in the class, and there's definitely the U.S. is known around for philanthropic content, but it does cover what's going on in other countries as well.
Great, thank you so much. And it looks like that'll probably close our questions and answer session for today. Thank you all. All right, and thank you all again for spending your afternoon with us, and thank you to our panelists for your wonderful insights, and Jon. And we hope that this has kind of helped inform your decisions as you move forward and helped with your outreach and leadership efforts as you navigate this more challenging landscape. And with that, I hope everyone has a pleasant afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.